We welcome you to today's SEI webinar, Q-Day Countdown, Are You Prepared? My name is Matthew Butkovic. I'm the Technical Director for Cyber Risk and Resilience in the CERT division of the SEI. Today, I'm joined by two of my colleagues, Brett Tucker. Brett is the Technical Manager for Cyber Risk in the division. And we're also joined by Dan Justice, who is a quantum and AI researcher. Welcome, guys.
Hello.
Thanks, pleasure.
So today, we are going to cover a lot of ground. There's a lot of interest in this topic. There's much that we could discuss. And I'm sure that folks that are viewing this will have questions. So I just want to tell everyone, we want to make this as interactive as possible. So please do submit your questions in the YouTube chat area, and we'll get to as many as we can. We did receive several questions. We're going to bake those into the conversation. So I think we should start at the very beginning. And Dan, I'll turn to you first. Today's topic is Q-Day. And underpinning that question is Q, which in this case is quantum.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe describe briefly the difference between quantum computing and classical computing.
Right. So quantum computing is a new type of hardware. It's a new type of technology. It's been in development for a while. So new is, it is relative. However, the algorithms that can run on it are different than classical computers in the sense that they trade exponential state space for time. When you try to represent exponential state space on classical computers, it takes an exponential amount of hardware. And so using this, with quantum computers, we can accelerate certain algorithms and get to solutions faster. And some of these problems that we can accelerate have security risks to them. Specifically, it's going to be breaking encryption, which is kind of what we're calling Q-Day, which is where you have a quantum computer that can perform Shor's algorithm, which is the algorithm that breaks encryption. And we're specifically looking normally at RSA 2048. Q-Day is going to be the day that we can break RSA 2048 with a quantum computer. It is going to be a quantum computer is a CPU accelerator. So it is going to be an addendum to classical compute. You'll channel some of the hard part of your algorithm onto the quantum computer, and then it'll feed back in. There'll be some post-processing.
So there's a lot to unpack there, Dan. Thank you for that intro. So what I'm hearing is that we have the emergence of a new class of technology.
Mm-hmm.
It can do things far faster using a different architecture.
Absolutely.
And that's going to give us tremendous benefits, but there's also risks. So I know here in the Software Engineering Institute, you do research into both AI and quantum, and you've taught up more than 15 courses, so you're well qualified for this topic. Brett, you do research and applied research on risk management. So maybe just if you could just introduce the audience to what you see, and I think Dan has shown us the outlines of what some of the potential risks are. In the introduction of quantum. We'll unpack all this in greater detail.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I'll start off with the idea that we should level set to think that risk is uncertainty, no more, no less. That means there's an opportunistic side just as much as there is a threat. So on the opportunistic side, and Dan, you touched upon it, like it will accelerate. Actually, it will change the face of many sciences and industries in terms of computing algorithms that we have not really been able to crack. And we make approximations, maybe that kind of thing, but we'll have far greater fidelity and insights into sciences. That's one thing. That's the opportunity side. But on the threat side, as you had mentioned too, at Q-Day, all encryption falls, or all classical encryption falls. And that is a primary threat because if you think about it, everything we do in computing, if you think about banking, for example, if you think about even just email, all those things will become inherently known to the world. There'll be a loss of confidentiality. For those who actually, we need to be distinct and clear here too. This is a marathon, not a sprint in terms of the evolution of quantum. When Q-Day hits, it will only be those actors who have that technology that can use it. So there will be an imbalance of power, right? It's not that encryption falls for all, maybe it's just for one state actor. So as a nation or as nations go, we're concerned that there's going to be threat actors who will now know your information without you wanting to know it, and it should have or it could have grave tactical and strategic impact on a country.
Thanks, Brett. So let's parse this, right? So it's in the title of today's webinar, It's been referenced a few times. So we're referring to this point in the future we're calling Q day, which is some point of demarcation where a viable, practical quantum computer is used by an adversary to do things that are unwanted and nefarious, right? But as you described, this is an evolution of technology. So as we approach that date, we will see gains and great strides made in lots of elements of quantum computing. So my question, and I'll first to Dan and then to Brett, how will we know Q day when it comes?
So this is a difficult question.
Understood. Apologies.
Yeah, it's a difficult question. And one of the reasons why this is a difficult question is you can liken this to the ENIAC machine. The ENIAC machine was what allowed us to break German codes back in the World Wars. And when we first got it up and running and we were able to crack the codes, we were silent about it. And so when we first have a quantum computer that is able to break codes, we may be breaking codes and we may be breaking encryption and learning information and not doing anything with it. And so that would be, as an observation of what's happening, it may be difficult to happen. Now, what might also happen is on the state level, nation state level, you may start to see nation states making predictions that are outside of what you might expect. So it's anything that starts to look like coincidences too often, that might be a way of seeing that. On a physical observation level, these machines right now are anticipated to be extremely large and extremely noisy. And so there would be certain happenings that the creation of this machine will take, right? It will take lots of GPUs in order to have the proper error correction. And they'll be located in areas where there's low amounts of radiation and noise. And so you may see a place where it may be underground or in a safe area where lots of energy, GPUs, and special materials are starting to be pushed into.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I know this is a difficult question, and we'll get to a few more difficult questions, but I just want to pull on that thread. So, and I'll ask this to you, Brett. Is it likely that we see the first practical application commercially of quantum computing before we see threat actors using it, maybe in the shadows, as Dan's described it?
That's a great question. I would imagine that this technology at this point is largely out of reach of most organizations and largely government subsidized, unless it's a large company like an AWS or a Google or something like that. And I'm not saying they're not conducting that research, but if I were hedging my bets, I would be more on the conservative side to say that it's largely going to be a state actor that might do this at first. But what you bring up is another interesting point. Let's suppose it does get commercialized. Clearly, a private organization is going to want to make profit off of this. So they will likely make that service readily available to folks who are maybe not necessarily state actors, who almost think of it as an internet, or excuse me, as a service that's available publicly. If that's the case, they're much like AI, will have to be a constitution or set of ethics in terms of application. And how will that be governed? Who will govern it? Those are all great questions that we should start thinking about today as technologists and as this technology evolves.
Yeah, and risk management is your primary domain. Yeah. There's many risk management questions. So I want to draw a parallel with AI. I remember the day when ChatGPT sort of fell from the sky for most people, and they became aware of generative AI and maybe just AI broadly. And that was a clear point of demarcation in my mind between theoretical academic discussion of AI and then AI being part of the popular culture and consciousness. It's sounding like Q day might be something slightly different, but there is a scenario where you see commercial and practical applications of quantum computing that emerge simultaneously with these other more threat-based scenarios for quantum.
Yes, and let's say that a chance favors the prepared mind, right?
Thank you.
So in this regard, we need to start thinking about this Q day today. And I know it's hard to do because we are so inundated with modern day disruptions of AI, and it's AI against cyber and cyber against AI, all that discussion is going down. But we should use that experience now as a model for how we might approach quantum. The notion here is, what are the steps I should be taking today? And Dan, you pointed out that we will still have to live with a classical computing environment. That's not going to go away. Quantum is going to ride on top of this as an enhancement.
Yeah, sir. Let's pause there for the audience, right? So
Yeah.
one of the misconceptions I think we hear often is that quantum computing will writ large replace classical computing. And I think that's important to understand that that's not the likely scenario, correct, Dan?
No, I mean, Brett's absolutely right here. Quantum computers are an accelerator, not the actual computer. We will almost definitely into the future maintain using what you would call von Neumann machines as our main architecture. And one of the ways you can think about why we aren't switching completely to quantum computers instead of a classical quantum hybrid is because you yourself are not in a quantum state, and you can't observe the quantum state that we're using to calculate. And that quantum state is collapsed into classical bits, which we then use on our classical computer. And so just to be able to interact with it, we live in a classical world. I'm not a quantum being, I'm a classical being, and I need classical information.
Yeah. Big tip on that one too. That means that as a professional set of folks that want the best for organizations, we cannot abandon the idea of following good cyber hygienic practices. We'll never be able to escape that responsibility. So I think if you have to do something immediately, it's get your hands wrapped around that first, and then start thinking about what are the next day type mitigations, which we can talk about as well. But for now, for the immediate, if your organization, you have to get the fundamentals down.
No, let's talk about the fundamentals. So one of the very rewarding things working for an FFRDC is contributing things that are truly enduring and foundational. And I think certainly in your work in the artificial intelligence division, certainly in the CERT division, we are building on things that we know are important and valid and scientifically rigorous, right? So when I think about risk management, right, and I think about quantum, it seems to me, to your point, we should ask the question, right? Are we following the set of principles that yielded secure solutions or created situations where risk within our tolerance and appetite, right? So it seems to me that can be directly ported over to the question of AI, to quantum, to implantables, to chemical computing, whatever it is. If focused on the fundamentals will see us through. Thoughts about that, Brett?
I would be careful with the see us through part. It's unclear if that is the case, but I do know that it is the foundation by which we will be seeing it through, right? There may be more. There are these notions of taking what we're doing today and doing it better or more efficiently. For example, how nimble are we at changing between and or implementing new encryption protocols? There's this idea of being crypto agile, for example. And as Dan might point out, I might steal a little bit of his thunder here, but to even know from a bill of materials, like a crypto bomb kind of point of view, what you even have implemented and what you need to transition to, you need to discipline your organization to be able to make that quick transition if this Q day does in fact hit and you find out that you have an encryption protocol that works versus one that doesn't.
So I really like where you're going with this, but I want to circle back to the idea of the fundamentals. So what I'm hearing is that the ability to have an understanding, a fine understanding of the assets you operate and their disposition will always be important. Right?
Yes.
So in this case, you're describing the application of encryption to determine it's adequate to protect the asset you have, in this case, an information asset. So I don't want to put too fine a point on this, but I want the audience to understand you don't have to throw away everything you know about sound governance and sound cybersecurity or AI engineering because quantum's the question, but rather what we need to do is apply these things in a tailored way to this new set of questions.
Right. I can give you a good example. The CI's Top 18 cites asset management as the #1 best practice for implementing good cybersecurity practice. And it still abides today. If you think about the harvest now, encrypt later problem, how would you know how to keep things absolutely confidential? Maybe you don't publish them at all. Maybe As a crude example, keep it literally on paper, locked in a safe, which is impractical, I get. But at the same time, if that's your solution, you have to know what to do that to. How do you evaluate it? How do you understand what value is there and what you need to truly insulate versus things that you don't really necessarily.
Sure. So thank you, Brett. And I understand what you're saying, right? That we have to understand the kind of causal chain that leads to the outcome we're trying to avoid, right? So, Dan, if you could just explore for us, help us understand better the idea that organizations may acquire encrypted information now, this has been referenced a few times, with the intention of kind of saving it, putting it on a shelf, if you'd like, to when they can crack the encryption with quantum computing. Can you maybe explain what that might look like?
Yeah. So, I come more with knowledge on quantum algorithms and AI, and this is part of the reason I team up with Brett, is he has a more understanding of risk management and cybersecurity and analysis. And so to my knowledge, though, this is the first time in history that we have widely encrypted a huge amount of our data into storage and also streaming currently, and just sending data out all over the place. When we know that it has a vulnerability that we can't yet exploit, but we know in some time in the future, we're not quite sure when, we can exploit that. And so this has brought into the system, the ecosystem, a new strategy of trying to get people's data that they don't want out there, which is, I'm just going to save data nonstop. If I see you streaming a data that's encrypted in one of these vulnerable modern protocols, I'm just going to save it off, put it into cold storage until I have a quantum computer. And then later on, when there is a quantum computer that can break that encryption, I'm going to stream it back off, break the encryption, and have your data. Now, obviously, this requires that the data that I save today has some sort of value in 20, 30, 40, 50, whatever it is that Q-Day happens, that still has value when that happens. But there is data out there. We know that there is data out there that is likely to be valuable for the next 100 years. And that's the strategy that we're seeing state actors or bad actors having, is that they are going to save data that thinks valuable now, they're going to decrypt it later. And so storage is cheap right now.
So there's so much to explore in what you've said, but to draw maybe a crude analogy, it's a little like being a safe cracker. And right now you're stealing all the safes full of things you can find, anticipating the ability to crack those safes in the future.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. So this is very different than other sorts of threat scenarios. So I was thinking about Dan's comments, Brett, and there's many things I want to unpack there, but I was thinking about from a risk perspective, if I'm a board of directors, if I'm senior IT security leadership, if I'm the senior risk resource within an organization, I have to think about the long tail of this. So which makes me think, and correct me if I'm wrong, you must identify what's most critical. And then it seems to me you need to then think about the scenario in which it's compromised and what the consequences are.
That's right. I also should point out, if you're that CISO or that C-suite executive, there are compliance-driven measures that are going to set the pace of what's going on here as well. We know our National Security Agency, for example, has already set standards by which they believe certain encryption protocols should be adopted. And I believe you're going to see that as kind of like the leading edge driving organizations to that end. Let's face it, it's an economics of risk question as well. It's expensive to do these transitions in different encryption protocols and all these different other strategies, right? And I think that compliance is going to actually lead that day. The trick for a good CISO is the CISO who is looking down the road to understand which of the controls, which of the practices are going to get the best return on risk investment. And that's something else that we're looking at here in our research, is to figure out what practices should be abided by first versus what can we do next to get the biggest bang for the buck.
So return on security investment, it's a really important point. So,
That's right.
And I think it's important to say too, that certainly some of those most enduring, valuable, confidential items will be in the national security space. However, I would argue if you're watching this and you're in healthcare or banking or the defense industrial base, right, it's not simply just the domain of national security apparatus agencies, right? So
That's right.
that's where the tech may be now because of the complexity and expense of it.
Mhm.
I want to take just a slight detour into a more technical topic. So crypto agility. So this has been referenced a few times.
Mhm.
Dan, I'm hoping you can explain a little more in a little more detail what we mean by that at a technical level. I know there's folks with varying backgrounds and technical understandings viewing this, but I think there's a portion of the audience that appreciate a deep dive, if you may, if on the technical implementation and implications of crypto agility.
Yeah, so I think there's two main components that make crypto agility kind of a buzzword that has really started to sink into the community. And the first is recognizing that we are on the verge of a giant cryptographic migration. We know that there are security vulnerabilities in some of our algorithms, and we're now moving to a new set of algorithms that was recently, just in 2024, posted by NIST as acceptable. And so we'll be moving to that. You can see FIPS, I believe, 203, 204, and 205 as a reference for these algorithms and how to apply them. And the next problem that makes crypto agility really interesting is the recognition that while we are moving to these new algorithms, we're not exactly completely trusting these algorithms. Um, they have been under multiple years of testing. They've been open source. They're under a battery of review, and they're continuing to go on. However, the amount of review and analysis that they have been under is completely different than what our modern encryption has been. It's been years and years and years. And so we trust our modern encryption to be what we think it is, and we're not sure what to think of these new ones.
So sorry, Dan, is it more of a verification sort of problem?
It
Is that
is a
what
verification.
Okay.
So for instance, there was an algorithm that right before being accepted, a couple of months before NIST accepted it, it was called Bike. And it was found to have a horrible vulnerability that was able to break it using very little hardware. And so there's questions to be had, and there's trust issues here. And so we recognize that this may not be the only migration that needs to be made. And the migration may not only be made due to the second migration might not only be due to, say, vulnerabilities, but maybe we find more efficient algorithms. These new protocols are heavy as far as the amount of data that it takes to transfer the needed information, as well as the processing power that it takes in order to encrypt and decrypt. And we may find suitable algorithms that are just much more efficient. And so you may see another migration just for efficiency's sake. So crypto agility is the concept of you're going to need to move on to a new cryptographical scheme across the board, and you may want to be prepared to do this again in not completely short order, but not midterm order. Maybe.
Sure. So what we may see then, there's sort of a rapid evolution. So a few times NIST has been mentioned. So let's talk about it. So NIST is the National Institute of Standards and Technology. It's part of the Department of Commerce here in the United States.
Absolutely.
And they're one of the leading voices on this topic. I was going to ask if there's other sources related to the algorithm and the cryptological elements that you think folks should listen to. Where's the action? Who's saying smart things in the space right now?
I think that if you're looking government-based, I think the NSA has put out some amazing materials on that subject. They've put out their, I believe it was called the 2.0 suite, talking about the cryptography, and it's an FAQ on what you should be looking at, maybe some actions you can take, and some guidelines. Who else would you suggest, Brad?
I wanted to point out for the NSA before we move on, neither NIST nor the NSA nor any others, to my mind, provide the surefire answer. So I want to be clear on this. There are best practices to be followed and ideas, but nobody is saying, patently, like this is absolutely the path that needs to be taken. So to clarify, even if it's other governments who may be publishing standards and whatnot, we need to be cautious not to invest whole hog. Rather, this goes back to the classical idea of defense in depth. So in other words, take the best practices of all strategies that you find. And with that, make sure that you're implementing not only what you can afford, but what sounds, to be the best or most practical solution.
Yeah, I think one of the most important things we can do in these webinars is make the audience smart consumers of information.
Yes.
And ultimately smart consumers of what they'll find in the marketplace. And I know it's a very nascent market, right? In fact, we're maybe ahead of where folks would assume the state of the art and state of practice might be, right? So it seems to me at this stage that the specifics of how best to do this are still being determined. So be skeptical consumers and take on board that there's a great deal of uncertainty related to the longevity of a given algorithm or cryptographic approach. And that we may see, this will lead to the next question, technological leaps that change the landscape.
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
So, I mean, this is what keeps it interesting for all of us, right? So,
keep showing your toes.
Before I get to the next question, I'm sorry, Tim.
Could I actually do one go back
Of
there,
course.
please? One of the other places, if you're looking for places that are really good in understanding the space and breaking ground, I would look at the financial industry. The financial industry is publishing a lot of research actually right now, a plethora of research on this exact topic. Especially if you're interested in communications and securing not just modern communication, but quantum communication. So
thanks. That's a very good point. I'd also be remiss to not point out that the Software Engineering Institute itself has said a good deal about this topic, and certainly we should reference this gentleman's work and the work of others here and Brett's work as well. So, okay, guys. So imagine I'm looking at my calendar and I'm trying to plan a Q-Day party for the future. Now, this is a very difficult question, but I think this is one the audience is clamoring to understand. So,
imagery party hats.
Are you okay with moving it on your calendar?
Yeah, well, I need to, right? Exactly.
Okay.
So, and I know now we're in dangerous territory, but I think it would be conspicuous by its absence if we don't address when we think Q-Day is going to. I mean, again, it's in the title, right? Are you prepared for it? I'll go to Dan first. How far away from Q-Day are we?
So I'm going to try and give a range. And
I think that's wise.
I'm going to try to back it up with some papers that are out there. So it's going to be a little bit technical. There is a paper out there published in 2019 by Craig Gidney and his collaborators named How to Break RSA 2048 with 20 million noisy qubits up from that day. Qubits have been getting better. And if you were to take that number, 20 million noisy qubits, and you look at the number of qubits that are generally considered available nowadays, I'll pick a number around, they're in the hundreds, so we'll say about 400. And we have seen for about the last decade a Moore's-ish law in the number of qubits every 2 years. So you see a doubling in the number of qubits almost every 2 years. And you take that doubling period out and you know that you need 20 million qubits. You find that you get 20 million qubits at around mid-2050s.
2050s. Now,
there's a new paper that came out this last year that says it's going to be, you can break RSA 2048 using 1 million qubits. This is also by Craig Gidney and his collaborators. And if you then continue the doubling, you find that with 1 million qubits, you're looking at late 2030s, early 2040s. And so this is assuming that we have consistent doubling. This is assuming we don't get any better algorithmic improvements. This is assuming no scientific engineering breakthroughs or major obstacles that aren't, able to be overcome. So, it seems like we're marching towards it. And it seems like it could be faster than we thought it was 2 years ago.
Yeah. What an interesting discussion, because this comes back to risk appetite and how organizations feel about what they're really holding. And, it's almost like a hedge that to start doing things now versus later. The bigger question is what now versus what later. And like I said, it's the fundamentals. This goes back to crypto agility. But I think it's important for organizations to keep a watch on the progression of the technology. And I think what this is calling to is a regular assessment of risk appetite. Does our projection of, let's say, 2030, let's say someone's being very conservative about it, does that still make sense? And if so, what do we want to be doing against that? And I think we get comfortable sometimes in not reassessing that appetite regularly, at least annually, if not maybe ever so often, if there's a shift in technology, depending on what's in the media, what's in academia.
Yeah, this seems like the classic. Thanks, Brett. That makes a lot of sense. This seems like the classic managing conditions, managing consequences dilemma, right?
Yeah.
So we can't do much to manage conditions, right? So the technology is going to advance in the way that's going to advance. We may see great leaps forward. We may see disappointments that push the date back.
Mm-hmm.
I would argue that organizations have to also think about the consequences that something happens unanticipated or an accelerated timeline, right?
Yeah.
So this is where, in my mind, Brett, threat modeling comes in.
Yeah.
A risk register, as you said, some regular check-in on the state of the tech. I'm thinking there's folks in the audience today that have to maintain that technology roadmap for their organizations.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly quantum needs to appear. The question is, where on that horizon should it appear? But I would argue, unless you gentlemen tell me wrong, there's nothing stopping you from considering it today, and it should be something that's on your technology roadmap.
I absolutely agree.
Yeah, I would say a strategy that I think might be useful is to pick a time when you think, all right, no matter what, I'm going to consider this the day that's going to arrive. Let's say it's 2040. And that's the day. And then you want to look at your data and make sure that you've migrated to a proper encryption for however long that data's lifetime is. Like, let's say it maintains value for 10 years. You need to make sure that you have migrated encryption before 10 years before the date that you have picked yourself.
Mhm.
So if you pick 2040 and it's 10-year shelf life, you need to make sure that it's encrypted before 2030. That would probably be a decent strategy to start off with.
That's a great suggestion. So that is underpinned by something that isn't trivial or easy, which is understanding the data you have, the enclaves in which it lives, its shelf life,
Mm-hmm.
and all the things surrounding its protection,
Mhm.
right? So
Mm.
this is it seems to me, Brett, this is a typical risk management question or challenge that organizations face. But
Yes.
what Dan's saying makes a lot of sense to me, right? That we should not only look at the data for its criticality, but also criticality in the context of the duration of value, right?
Yeah, and when I think of duration of value, and this is actually getting a little bit into the woo factor of it, so bear with me.
We're okay with that.
I know that it's even when we have this quantum capability, it will take time to decrypt and sift through all this information. So I start to think about strategies where we have so much that we can just pump out, and it's almost like poisoning AI learning, right? Instead, you just poison it with just a whole bunch of encrypted garbage. And you paralyze the other organization because they have to sift through so much. Now, that might be assisted, though,
We
by
talked about this. It was almost
Yeah.
like the DDoSing of the quantum computer we talked
that's
about.
Are you suggesting sort of an encrypted data honeypot for? So
Yeah.
is it the quantity of data that you're pointing to that would complicate it?
That and I mean, I could just encrypt a beautiful story about Mickey Mouse and convince you of that, almost like like in Vietnam, like, hey, I'm going to tell stories to demonstrate that I'm a worthy prisoner to keep around kind of an idea. And it's going to take a savvy workforce to be trained to understand how to sift through that. I'm not saying that large language models and things like that may be of assistance at that point in time, but it's interesting to think that a strategy that's being used today to distract and or inhibit the application of AI is yet another similar practice that can be used yet again when this Q day finally hits.
Yeah, certainly. We'll be porting over these techniques from one to the other, which is really important. So
Mhm.
shifting gears slightly. Sorry, unless you had a
But
follow on.
I think it's been an interesting that Brett and I have talked about, and we're still trying to get wording around it. But the idea is that when Q day happens, it's also quantum computers are they're going to be extremely rare, and they're going to have the least amount of throughput possible at that time, right? Theoretically, as we see technology grows, its capability grows later on. And so even though we say Q day is the day maybe that you can break RSA 2048, the chances that your information gets processed at that moment is pretty rare because there's a priority queue. And so there is this thing of this idea of produce enough information and perhaps they'll never get to your information because it's too far down the queue.
It's really interesting. So a host of new risk management challenges ahead of us. And one of the things I'm most proud of is that here at the SEI, we're on the cutting edge of this sort of thing, right? For government, for the DoD, and also for our partners in industry.
Yeah, and an advertisement for people to get into this science. We need
Yeah.
professionals who can think through these kind of problems. So
yeah, let's talk about that. So I know that you are forming a community of interest for this topic, and details pending. But certainly, if you're interested in this topic, check back with the SEI, because I think in the near future we'll have an outlet for your thoughts. But just generally, now, Brett, I know your pedigree coming into this, and for you, this is applying your skills and expertise in risk management to a new domain, which is quantum. That's one path, and Dan, slightly different for you, right? So I was hoping you explain how you came to work with quantum as a topic, and how others maybe aspiring to work in quantum as a topic should structure their education and their knowledge.
Yeah, so we identified quantum in our division as an emerging technology approximately 7 to 8 years ago, and we put together a portfolio of ideas as to why we thought that it was going to be, an important topic going forwards, and we got research funding for it, and then we started working in that, and then we started working on the actual research, and then we took the idea of was it learn one, teach one, do one, or learn one, do one, teach one, and we started teaching and doing, and so we started to grow our system there. The teams that we've had work on quantum have all been cross-disciplinary or interdisciplinary also. Generally, we have experts on one area that we recognize there is either quantum needs it, or quantum technologies will actually benefit it or have a threat in that area. And so that's the beautiful part about this, is that you get to go around and meet new people all the time. I am just learning about risk management and cybersecurity mostly through Brett, through our discussions and our current work. And that wasn't something I had a year ago. I came to it with a computer science and mechanical engineering degree, and kind of throughput or mindset. We see that actually a lot of mechanical engineers get into this area, a lot of computer scientists get into this area. We're starting to see more physicists, a lot more chemists. We're starting to see financial individuals. We're starting to see AI really come into this area. And so I think that there's a lot of ways to jump into it. I do suggest taking courses. There's there's many courses out there now, either online or in person. And I would suggest jumping in that way and taking what you already know and bringing it to the industry.
Yeah, and the interdisciplinary, cross-disciplinary aspect of this is really interesting. It's one of the things we pride ourselves on at SEI and also at CMU. So you don't have to be a physicist to do quantum. I know, Brett, you have a background in chemical engineering.
Chemical, yeah, and nuclear.
And nuclear engineering. And for you, it's Dan, it's mechanical engineering. So you're seeing disparate disciplines brought together, right?
Yeah.
And then certainly you have a tremendous wealth of knowledge in AI and risk management. So I think there's a real strength in that, right? And one of the things I'd encourage our audience to do, as you said, is to think broadly about this, both in its application and its construction.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're starting to see it growing even into policy and ethics. Like, we're recognizing that this is a technology that's going to change the world, and
Right.
we need to accommodate for that.
Yeah.
So I have some practical questions for us, right? So, and I imagine folks in the audience may have similar thoughts, right? So, Brett, let's start with you. So let's say for those that are joining us today that are on boards of directors, or they have a C-level position in an organization, what's one question they should be asking themselves or asking their organizations about quantum right now?
I'm going to start with the basic. Are we even thinking about the horizon that may have quantum computing in it? At the minimum, think about the pain that could be felt by such a day arriving. I'm not even worried so much about the time horizon, just are we thinking about the future horizon? And by the way, to finish that discussion off, it's not just quantum. There's just so many other things. You'd pointed to chemical computing. You pointed to even AI today, that kind of thing. So never stop looking at the horizon is my advice there.
Ensure that this is this is an item of discussion that's on somebody's list.
Yes, that somebody is actually thinking about it, and it doesn't even have to be doing. At the minimum, are we considering what could be?
You mentioned
Yeah.
ethics, right? And the implications of this, right? I
Sure.
think that I think it's important to understand that, we're talking about quantum and Q-Day in a mainly negative context in this discussion, not intentionally. We mentioned the upside and the benefit. One of the things that also occurred to me as I was putting notes together for today's session was there are people in the audience right now that will end up developing quantum products in the future.
That's right.
There'll be quantum features, quantum products. So maybe shifting gears slightly to you, Dan, from the quantum engineering perspective, what is one thing? I know it's a little ahead of the curve here. What's one thing folks should ask themselves about their products or future products and services related to quantum?
If you're looking to use quantum compute for a separate thing from Q-Day, I guess the question I always ask people is, do you have a Fourier transform in your pipeline? Fourier transforms are useful mathematically and computer-wise all throughout signal processing, voice, everything. And so if you have that, even in your AI, these can be in AI models too, there's a good chance maybe that there's an analog quantumly that you can speed part of that up. And then that's a little bit maybe too specific. And so the other question that you would ask yourself is there computation that's just taking way too long, right? Do I have bottlenecks and throwing more GPUs at it just isn't happening? If I had until the heat death of the universe, I could solve it. Well, I don't plan to be there for that, and so I need another option,
Right.
right? If that's the question if that's the problem that you're having, let's talk.
Right. I think a pragmatic discussion there too. Clearly this science or this technology at the beginning especially will be expensive. Are you willing to invest in the higher fidelity solution? Is an approximation good enough? And there's going to be a lot of discussion about, well, I can get that answer, but is that accuracy of that answer really worth my investment?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we've done some of this already, but I was thinking about sort of a quantum computing myth busting.
Okay.
Right.
So,
Love it.
So, Dan, you seem to react to that as well. Let's start with you.
I saw an article a while back that said that quantum computers can reverse time.
So just to be clear, quantum computers cannot reverse time.
They cannot. There's an inkling of truth that before you measure a quantum circuit, the circuits are reversible. However, you can also have reversible circuits in classical computing.
Yeah.
That was the most truth I could get out of that.
So if you're watching this today and you have aspirations of time travel related to quantum, temper your expectations with me.
Yeah.
No, just wait a couple more years for that.
Okay.
I think a myth that we've already somewhat touched upon and dispelled is that quantum computing is strictly a technological challenge that is coming our way.
Yeah,
there's a lot of socioeconomic considerations, the ethics considerations, and I don't want people to feel disenfranchised from this technology just because they don't understand the qubit and how it operates in the physics sense. There's much like AI, there's a lot to be done surrounding the technology.
Yeah. So I think everyone is going to be affected by quantum computing, right? It's a question of what your role is in that ecosystem. So again, I think as we do often in these sorts of talks, we're biasing towards the negative outcomes we have to avoid. But again, not to put in the spot, you mentioned, right, if we don't have until the heat death of the universe to figure out a problem, we may employ quantum in the future. So again, not to put you on the spot, what is one prediction you would like to make, right? No money riding on, it's your reputation, of something that will get better or be solved by quantum?
Oh man. I would love to see I normally go towards protein folding. I think that would be a really valuable. I know there's many people looking into that, and I think that would be very valuable for humans and their health and understanding the human body and genome and everything. And so I would love to see protein folding being that solution.
So that could be a breakthrough that has so many implications
Yes.
for human life and health.
Yeah, and Yeah, I think there's also drug discovery
Mhm.
that so those two together I think are really big.
So lots of life science implications for sure.
Yeah.
Brett?
Dare I say, I want a statistical certainty of when the Cleveland Browns will win the Super Bowl. Being that that's impossible, we will see heat death first. I'm just saying.
I think they're in a neck and neck
Being
race.
from
right?
Northeastern Ohio, I'm just begging for it. Now, I think you know, there will be a lot of great engineering, greater understanding of engineering practice, and I think the encryption is one part, but imagine what a post-quantum encryption science would look like. It's the what next after quantum. If it's so super at its ability, what's the next turn of math that whole science will be advanced.
Yeah, you could see then a rapid succession of advancements that stack on each other,
Yes.
and then truly extraordinary things emerge.
Yeah.
right?
What's the next horizon? I'm anxious to see what that next horizon looks like.
And even if we could travel back in time, I don't think it helps your situation with the crowd.
That's exactly it. Sitting in Pittsburgh, I totally agree.
Well, if you do have questions and you're in the audience, please feel free to put those in chat or send them on here to the SEI. So I think that's probably a good place to end this conversation. There's so much more we could talk about, but I think we've given folks a very substantial overview of the implications of quantum, what Q-Day is and what it isn't, most importantly, and the fact that all of us have a role to play in this field. So Brett and Dan, great discussion. I want to thank you for joining me. And I want to thank all of you in attendance today. Upon exiting, please hit the like button below and a few other announcements for folks in our audience. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel by clicking the SEI seal in the lower right corner of the video. We hope you found value in our presentation today and encourage you to visit our website. Our next webcast will be October 22nd, and our topic is the 5 essential questions for implementing the software acquisition pathway with Eileen Rubel and Bridget Ahern. Registration information is on our website, and certainly I would encourage everyone to tune into that. So once again, I just want to thank our guests Dan and Brett for joining us today.
Thanks.
Thanks, Matt.